Widow's daughter heals Cowboy, not knowing he will repay them unexpectedly. The blizzard had come without mercy, roaring across the Montana plains like a wild beast that refused to rest. The sky was a colorless sheet, the wind howled through cracks in the small Mayfield cabin, and snow piled so high it threatened to swallow the world whole. Inside the cabin, Clara Mayfield worked to keep the fire alive. Her mother lay on a cot by the wall, wrapped in quilts that could no longer keep out the chill. The stew on the hearth was thin, little more than broth and potatoes, but it was all they had left. Clara's fingers were numb, her face pale from nights without sleep. The cold wasn't the only thing pressing against her heart. Her mother's cough had worsened, and Clara knew the sickness would soon take her if spring didn't come soon. When the wind slammed hard against the door, Clara looked up in alarm. It came again, this time not the wind but a sound beneath it. A faint thud. Almost like knocking. At first she thought she imagined it. But there it was again, 3 uneven knocks swallowed by the storm. "Mama," she whispered, already pulling her shawl tighter. "Someone's outside." Her mother's weak voice rose from the bed. "Nobody'd be fool enough to travel in this storm, child. Don't you go opening that door?" But Clara was already moving. Her heart pounded as she pulled back the latch and forced the door open against the screaming wind. Snow poured inside, burning her skin like ice. Then she saw him. A man lay half buried in the drift, his body slumped over the frozen ground. His coat was torn, his face ashen. He was bleeding, badly, from his shoulder. A trail of red marked the snow behind him. Clara's breath caught. Dear God. She stumbled out into the storm, dragging him by the arms. He was heavy, too heavy for her small frame, but somehow she got him inside and shut the door against the wind. Her mother's eyes went wide when she saw the stranger. "What have you done, Clara?" "He'll die if we don't help him," Clara said breathlessly, kneeling beside the man. "I can't just let him freeze." The stranger's skin burned with fever. His breathing was shallow, ragged. Clara tore open his coat, and that's when she saw the wound, raw, ugly, and deep. It was a bullet wound. "Mama," she whispered, trembling, "someone shot him." Mrs. Mayfield's face turned pale. "Lord help us. He might be runnin' from the law." Clara hesitated for a heartbeat. Then she pressed a cloth to the wound and said softly, "Then he'll have to answer to the law later. Right now he answers to me." She worked quickly, washing the wound with hot water, stitching the torn flesh with thread from her mother's mending kit. Her hands shook, but she didn't stop. The man groaned once but never fully woke. She wiped the sweat from her brow and whispered, "Hold on, stranger. You're not dying here." When the worst of it was done, she covered him in every blanket she could find and sat close to the fire. Hours passed. The storm howled, the wood hissed, and her mother dozed in weak sleep. Every so often, Clara glanced at the stranger's face. He was rough around the edges, unshaven, with a jaw that looked like it had seen too much life. His hands were calloused, Cowboy's hands. She wondered what kind of man he was. What kind of trouble had chased him into her doorstep in the middle of a storm like this? Her mother stirred and looked over at her. "You did right, Clara," she murmured. "A soul in need's a soul worth saving." "But what if he's dangerous?" Clara asked quietly. "Then the Lord'll deal with him. You just do what's right." Clara nodded, though doubt still tugged at her. She stayed by the stranger's side all night, keeping the fire alive, keeping him alive. The storm outside beat against the walls as if it wanted to take him back. Near dawn, just as the wind began to die, the man stirred. His hand twitched, then reached for hers. Clara leaned closer, startled to see his eyes open, pale green, unfocused but alive. Where am I?" he rasped. "You're safe," Clara said softly. "You're at the Mayfield cabin. You've been shot but you'll live." His lips curved faintly just before his eyes closed again. "Then you're my angel," he whispered, his voice barely a breath. Clara sat frozen, watching as sleep claimed him once more. The storm outside was fading and the cabin was quiet again. Only the fire crackled, soft, steady like a heartbeat in the dark. And as the first light of morning crept across the frosted window, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just changed forever. When morning finally came, the world outside lay buried under a thick blanket of snow. The wind had died to a whisper and everything was still, so still it made Clara uneasy. The fire had burned low through the night. Clara stirred it back to life, adding the last of the chopped wood. She glanced toward the stranger sleeping by the hearth. His color was better now. The fever had eased a little, though he was still weak. She poured some water into a tin cup and placed it by his side. When he didn't move, she hesitated, wondering if he'd wake at all. Her mother's soft voice came from behind. He's still with us then? Clara nodded. He's strong, whoever he is. Mrs. Mayfield smiled faintly and coughed. Strong men don't always mean safe men, child. Clara looked back at him, the rugged line of his jaw, the stubble shadowing his face, the faint twitch of his lips as if he dreamed of something painful. He don't look like a criminal to me. Her mother gave a weary sigh. The devil himself can look like an angel if you meet him in the right light. It was near noon when the man stirred again. He blinked slowly, confused as though the light itself pained him. Clara knelt beside him, gently touching his shoulder. Easy now, she said. You've been through quite a bit. He frowned, his voice low and hoarse. Where am I? The Mayfield cabin, she replied. You were caught in the storm. I found you half frozen outside. He tried to sit up, but a sharp groan escaped his lips as pain shot through his wound. Clara pressed her hand gently against his chest. Don't move too quick. You were shot. The bullet's out, but the wound needs time. His eyes met hers then, clear, green, but clouded by something deeper than pain. You saved me? I did what anyone would do. He gave a small, crooked smile. Ma'am, I reckon not everyone would have opened their door in the middle of a blizzard. Not for the likes of me. Clara blushed and looked away. Then I suppose you're lucky I did. Over the next few days, the stranger, Luke Callahan, as he finally told her, began to recover. He ate little, spoke less, and spent long hours staring into the fire as though it reminded him of something lost. Clara noticed the way he kept glancing toward his saddlebag, the one she'd taken from the snow and set by the door. When she asked about it, he simply said, A man's life fits in that bag, Miss Mayfield. Best not to go looking inside it. She nodded, though curiosity burned within her. When he was strong enough to stand, Luke insisted on helping around the cabin. He split wood, repaired a broken chair, and even patched the leaking roof. Despite his quiet nature, he moved with the ease of a man who'd worked the land his whole life. Sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, Clara caught him studying her, with a kind of gentle wonder that made her heart race. One evening, as the snow melted slightly under a brief stretch of sunlight, they sat near the fire while her mother rested. The flames painted gold across Luke's face. You live here alone? He asked. Just Mama and me, Clara said. My father passed 2 winters ago. The land's hard, but it's home. Luke's gaze softened. Home's a rare thing. I haven't had one in a long while. Clara turned toward him. Were you traveling somewhere? He hesitated, eyes darkening. Nowhere that matters. The silence stretched, heavy with the unspoken. Outside, a coyote howled. Clara finally said, You don't have to tell me your story. But if you mean harm, you best say so now. Luke met her eyes squarely. No harm, Miss Mayfield. Just a man trying to live long enough to make peace with his ghosts. Something in his tone silenced her doubts. She didn't know what ghosts haunted him, but she believed him. The next morning, Luke found her outside, chopping what little wood was left. He took the axe from her hands without a word. You'll wear yourself thin, he said. I'm used to it, she replied. He gave her a soft grin. Maybe so. But let me do something useful, will you? You already stitched me back together. Least I can do is swing an axe. His smile reached his eyes this time, and for the first time since her father died, Clara felt warmth that didn't come from the fire. From that day the cabin felt different. The air still held grief, the wind still howled outside, but something small and good had begun to grow, something fragile as the first sprout of spring beneath the snow. Clara didn't understand it yet, but she sensed it deep in her chest. The stranger she saved was changing her world in quiet ways. And though Luke Callahan tried to hide it, she could see it in his gaze too, that same wondering light. Neither of them knew then how much their lives were about to entwine. But the storm that brought him wasn't done changing everything. It had only begun. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm. The snow outside began to soften under a weak spring sun, though drifts still clung stubbornly to the fence posts. Inside the cabin, warmth returned in small ways, the smell of fresh bread, the sound of laughter that hadn't been heard there in months, and the steady rhythm of a man's boots moving across wooden floors. Luke Callahan had brought life back into the place. He mended the barn roof, fixed the squeaky door hinges, and taught Clara how to patch harness leather with more skill than her father ever had. There was a steadiness in his voice, the calm of a man who'd seen too much and learned the value of silence. Yet there was something else too, something hidden in the way he'd fall quiet whenever she asked where he came from, or why he had been alone out in the storm. Clara had grown up with loss. It made her kind but also cautious. And though she trusted Luke's gentle hands and kind eyes, There were moments when unease whispered in the corners of her heart. It was on one such morning that she found the saddlebag. Luke had gone out to split firewood. Her mother was asleep, and Clara was sweeping near the door when her broom caught on the leather strap of his bag. The flap had come loose and something inside glimmered in the dim light. She tried to ignore it at first, but curiosity has a way of outweighing reason. She knelt down, lifting the flap. Inside lay a small bundle of letters, creased, stained with what looked like blood. She unfolded the top one and her heart thudded. It was addressed to Sheriff William Dalton, Silver Creek County. Her eyes darted over the words, the ink faded but legible. Regarding the theft of the Harrow Ranch herd, suspect identified as Luke Callahan. Warrant for arrest issued. Dangerous, may resist. The words struck her like cold water. She read it twice, her throat tight, the letters trembling in her hands. Luke, a wanted man? She stuffed the letters back just as she heard his footsteps approaching. Her breath caught and she turned quickly, pretending to tidy the firewood. Luke entered, wiping snow from his brow, his usual quiet ease about him. But when his gaze landed on the saddlebag, she saw it, the quick flash of alarm in his eyes. "You been looking through my things, Miss Mayfield?" he asked, voice low, not angry but guarded. Clara's hands froze. She swallowed hard. Your bag was open. I didn't mean. You found the letters." His tone wasn't a question. She nodded slowly, guilt and fear twisting inside her. "I did. You're wanted, Luke. For cattle theft." She paused, then added, "and for runnin' from the law." Luke stared into the fire for a long moment, jaw tight. Then he took a slow breath and sat down at the table. "Guess I owe you the truth." He told her everything. He'd worked on the Harrow Ranch for years, breaking horses and driving cattle. When the ranch's stock began disappearing, the owner, greedy and cruel, had blamed him. Said Luke been selling them off to outlaws. When the sheriff came, Luke tried to prove his innocence, but the rancher's son had already sworn against him. He'd run before they could hang him for something he didn't do. "I didn't steal nothin'," he said finally, voice hoarse. "But I was too scared to stand my trial. And that's as good as guilt in these parts." Clara looked at him, her heart torn between fear and pity. "Why didn't you tell us?" He met her eyes. "Would you have opened that door if I had?" She wanted to say yes, but the truth caught in her throat. She didn't know what she would have done. Luke's shoulders sagged as though the weight of it all pressed him down. "If you want me gone, I'll leave by sundown. I won't bring shame on you or your mama." But Clara shook her head. "If you were a thief, you'd have taken our food, our tools, anything. You fixed more than you broke, Luke. That counts for something." He gave her a long look, one full of surprise and maybe a hint of gratitude. "You're a rare kind, Miss Mayfield." That evening, after her mother had gone to bed, Clara stepped outside to find him sitting on the porch, hat in his hands, staring at the moon rising over the snow. She sat beside him, pulling her shawl close. For a while they said nothing. Finally she whispered, "Are you plannin' to keep runnin'?" Luke gave a small, tired smile. "A man gets tired of runnin', Clara. But there's no mercy in the law out here. Sometimes even the innocent end up hangin'." The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of pine. Clara looked at him, her heart pounding in a way she couldn't quite understand. "I believe you," she said simply. He turned toward her, eyes wide as if he wasn't used to being believed. For a long time he said nothing. Then he reached up, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek, a gesture so gentle it made her shiver. "Then that makes one of us," he murmured. That night, Clara lay awake listening to the quiet creak of the cabin and the soft sigh of wind beyond the window. Something had shifted between them, something fragile like glass in the dark. She had looked into a man's brokenness and found her own heart reflected there. But she also knew this: truth doesn't stay buried for long on the frontier. And though she didn't yet know it, the world outside was already whispering Luke Callahan's name. The snow finally began to melt, revealing muddy paths and the early promise of spring. The thaw came with a certain restlessness, the kind that stirred gossip and suspicion in equal measure. And gossip, in a place like Silver Creek, could spread faster than wildfire. Luke had stayed longer than planned. He told himself it was to help with repairs or to make sure Clara and her mother were safe, but deep down he knew it wasn't duty keeping him there, it was her. Every morning, Clara found him already awake, tending the fire or feeding the animals. He was careful with his words, gentle with his hands, and respectful in every way that counted. Yet sometimes when their eyes met, there was a quiet charge in the air, something neither dared name. Mrs. Mayfield saw it before either of them did. One afternoon, as Clara kneaded dough by the window, her mother gave a knowing hum. "Don't you look at me like that," Clara said, half smiling, half blushing. "Like what?" her mother teased. "Like a woman who sees a storm brewin' in her daughter's eyes?" Clara rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her grin. "He's just tryin' to help, Mama." Mrs. Mayfield chuckled, the sound rasped by age and illness. "I ain't sayin' he ain't. Just remember, storms don't always mean rain. Sometimes they mean trouble." Clara's hands paused over the dough, and her gaze drifted to the window. Outside, Luke was splitting logs, the sun glinting off his dark hair. For the first time in a long while, she felt something close to peace. But her mother's words settled deep. That week, Luke rode into town to fetch medicine and supplies. It was the first time he'd left since the blizzard. Clara watched him ride off, the sky pale blue behind him, and she prayed the world would be kind. But Silver Creek was not a kind town. When Luke walked into the general store, conversation fell silent. Men at the counter glanced at him with narrowed eyes. Women paused mid-whisper. He kept his hat low, kept his tone polite, but he could feel their stares prickling his back. At the counter stood Sheriff William Dalton, a tall man with gray eyes and a jaw set hard as stone. "Well, I'll be," the sheriff drawled, looking Luke up and down. "Didn't expect to see you walking free around here." Luke froze, then turned slowly. "Afternoon, Sheriff." "Afternoon? That's all you got to say to the law you been running from?" Dalton stepped closer, his boots heavy on the floorboards. "You've been gone near 2 months. Word was you got caught in the storm." Luke's eyes met his, calm but unyielding. "Guess the storm didn't do its job." The sheriff leaned in. "You know there's still a warrant on your name. I could take you in right now." Luke held his gaze. "You could. But you won't, not without proof. And we both know you ain't got it." Dalton's lip curled. "You always did have a slick tongue, Callahan. Don't go thinking that girl you're hidin' with'll save you from what's comin'." Luke's eyes flickered. "Leave her out of this." "Can't, son," Dalton said, voice dripping with malice. "In a town like this, the moment you step foot in someone's house, your sins stick to their doorstep." By the time Luke returned to the cabin, Clara could see something had changed in him. His shoulders were tense, his jaw tight. "What happened?" she asked as he unloaded the supplies. He didn't answer at first. Finally, he said quietly, "The sheriff knows where I am." Clara's face went pale. "What'll you do?" Luke looked out toward the horizon, where the sun dipped low behind the pines. "A man can't outrun his name forever. But I ain't ready to leave you and your mama without wood, food, or a roof that don't leak. I'll stay till you're safe." "You'll stay?" she echoed softly. He nodded. "If you'll let me." For a long moment they stood there, the air between them thick with words unspoken. Then Clara reached for his hand. "You're not a burden, Luke. You're family now." He stared at her fingers against his as if he couldn't quite believe what he heard. Then, slowly, he squeezed her hand in return. The next day 2 townsfolk rode by, their wagon stopping just long enough to look toward the cabin. One of them spat in the snow. "Reckon the widow's girl took in that drifter," he muttered. "Sheriff says he's wanted. Shame what good folks'll do for a pretty face." Word spread like wildfire after that. By week's end, half of Silver Creek had an opinion about Clara Mayfield, and none of them were kind. Clara noticed the looks when she went to trade eggs and flour. Whispers followed her from the mercantile to the church steps. "Widow's daughter keepin' company with an outlaw," one woman hissed. "Mark my words, no decent man'll touch her now," another added. Clara tried to keep her head high, but their words stung deeper than she'd admit. When she returned home that night, Luke was waiting by the fire. She didn't need to say a word, he could see the pain in her eyes. "I'll go," he said quietly. "I won't have them ruin your name over me." "No," she said firmly, stepping closer. "They've already tried taking everything from me once. My father, my hope, my peace. I won't let them take what's good again." Luke shook his head, torn between gratitude and guilt. "You don't know what you're risking, Dot." "Yes, I do," she whispered. "And I'd do it again." The firelight flickered between them, casting warm gold over her face. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, and for the first time she didn't pull away. Outside the wind had stilled. But in the quiet of that cabin, 2 hearts began to beat in rhythm with something bigger than fear. The world could whisper what it wanted. Inside those walls, Clara and Luke had found something the town could never understand: mercy, trust, and the beginnings of love. The thaw brought more than just muddy roads, it brought eyes. The town of Silver Creek was alive again, and with that life came judgment. Every time a wagon rolled past the Mayfield cabin, Clara felt it. The stares. The whispered names. The pointed glances when she came to town for supplies. But Luke stayed. Despite the rumors. Despite the risk. He worked harder than ever, mending fences, tending the livestock, and keeping the roof from caving in after the long winter. Sometimes, in the quiet between chores, their eyes would meet across the yard, and Clara would see something in his gaze, something unspoken, warm, and dangerous. One morning, as Luke was splitting logs, Clara stepped out with a shawl around her shoulders. The dawn light painted her hair like fire. "You'll wear yourself out," she said softly. Luke smiled faintly, resting the axe. "Wouldn't be the first time." Clara hesitated. "Luke, about what the sheriff said. Is it true? Are you?" He cut her off gently. "An outlaw?" His voice was steady, but his eyes clouded. "Depends who you ask." She swallowed hard. "Then tell me who you are." Luke looked toward the treeline where the mist still clung to the ground. "I worked cattle down near Dry Creek 2 years back. My brother and I ran a small herd, honest work. But the landowner we worked for, he wasn't honest. Tried to cheat us out of wages. One night a fight broke out. Shots were fired." He paused, jaw tight. "He didn't walk away." Clara's breath caught. "And your brother?" "Dead before dawn." The silence that followed was heavy, the wind whispering through the pines. "So they blamed you," Clara said quietly. Luke nodded. "Sheriff Dalton was kin to the man who died. He didn't care who fired first. He just wanted someone to hang. I ran. Been running since." She stepped closer, searching his face. "And if they find you?" He met her gaze. "Then I hang." Clara's heart twisted. She wanted to speak, to comfort him, but before she could, her mother's cough echoed from inside. The sound was wet, harsh, worse than before. Luke's expression shifted instantly. "I'll fetch the doctor." "No," Clara said quickly. "You can't go back into town. Not with the sheriff watching the—" "I'll go by night," Luke insisted. "There's no other way." That night, while Clara sat by her mother's bed, Luke saddled his horse under a moonless sky. He pressed a folded note into Clara's hand before mounting up. "If I don't come back by sunrise," he began. She shook her head. "Don't you say it. I just want you to know," he whispered, "that you gave me something I didn't think I'd ever have again." "What's that?" "Peace." Then he was gone, hooves fading into the cold night. In town, the doctor's light was still burning when Luke arrived. He kept to the shadows, his hat low. But as he dismounted, a voice cut through the dark. "Thought I might find you here." Luke froze. Sheriff Dalton stepped from the shadows, rifle in hand. "Always the hero, huh? Riding out to save the widow's dying mother." The sheriff smirked. "Funny thing about good deeds, they don't wash away blood." Luke's eyes narrowed. "You ain't here for justice, Dalton. You're here for revenge." "Justice, revenge, same thing where I come from." The sheriff cocked the rifle. "Hands where I can see 'em." Luke's hand hovered near his side. His revolver sat heavy against his hip, but he didn't draw. "Don't do this, Bill." "Not here. Not now." But Dalton's finger twitched, just slightly. A gunshot cracked the silence. Then another. When Clara heard the horse outside hours later, she rushed to the door, hope lighting her face, until she saw the blood. Luke stumbled from the saddle, clutching his shoulder, his coat dark with crimson. "Luke!" she cried, running to him. She caught him before he fell, half dragging him inside. Mrs. Mayfield stirred weakly from her bed. "Dear Lord, what happened?" "Sheriff found me," Luke rasped. He won't be both Aaron you no more." Clara pressed cloth to his wound, tears streaking her cheeks. "You shouldn't have gone." "I had to," he whispered. "Couldn't let her suffer." She bit back a sob. "You'll be all right. I'll fix you same as before." He smiled faintly, eyes half closed. "Reckon I'm in good hands then?" Outside, the first light of dawn touched the snowmelt, painting the hills in gold. Inside, Clara worked tirelessly, bandaging, stitching, praying. But as the morning grew, so did the fear. The sheriff might be dead, but the law would come for Luke all the same. And this time there would be no place left to hide. The storm of blood and gunfire had passed, but its echo lingered. The next morning, a pale hush hung over the Mayfield cabin. Luke lay on the bed by the fire, his face ghost-white, his breath shallow. Clara had wrapped his shoulder tight, the bandages already stained crimson. Outside, the world was waking, birds calling, wind rustling through thawed branches. But inside, time felt trapped between heartbeats. Mrs. Mayfield dozed weakly near the hearth, her frail hands folded in prayer. Clara knelt beside Luke, wringing out a cloth and pressing it to his fevered brow. "You should have let me go," he murmured, voice cracked and low. "I couldn't," she whispered back. "Not after all you've done for us." He gave a faint smile, his eyes barely open. "You keep saying that, like I did something worth remembering. You did," she said fiercely. "You lived. You fought to keep us safe. That's worth everything." Luke tried to answer, but pain stole his words. He drifted into restless sleep, his hands still clutching hers. By midday, the rumble of hooves carried through the valley. Clara's heart clenched. She ran to the window. 5 riders, men with rifles and the glint of badges. The law had come. Her mother stirred, coughing weakly. "Clara, what's happening?" Clara swallowed hard. "Stay in bed, Mama. Don't move." She stepped outside, her hands trembling. The men slowed as they approached, the lead rider, Deputy Rains, pulling off his hat. "Mornin', Miss Mayfield," he called, his tone polite but sharp. "We're here on account of Sheriff Dalton. Heard there was trouble last night." Clara's throat went dry. "Trouble?" He nodded. Sheriff's horse came back alone. Blood on the saddle. His gaze drifted past her toward the cabin door. "Now, word in town says the outlaw Luke Callahan's been staying here." Clara forced her face still. "He's gone." Rains studied her, eyes narrowing. "That's so." She nodded. "Left before dawn. Didn't say where." For a long moment no one spoke. The only sound was the creak of leather and the slow snort of horses. Then Rains sighed, swinging down from his saddle. "Mind if we take a look inside?" Clara's heart pounded. "My mother's ill. She ain't up for visitors." Rains's expression softened just enough to look human. "Sorry to hear that, ma'am. But if Callahan's here, I can't just ride away." Her mind raced. Luke lay bleeding not 10 feet from where she stood. She had one choice and no time to think. "Fine," she said quietly. "But you come in respectful." The deputies followed her inside. The cabin was dim, firelight flickering over the walls. Luke lay still on the bed, half hidden under blankets, his face turned toward the shadows. Clara's heart hammered in her chest. Mrs. Mayfield coughed, weak but deliberate. "Clara dear," she rasped, "fetch the basin. I think my fever's risin' again." Rains hesitated, glancing at the old woman. "That your mother?" "Yes," Clara said, her voice steady now. "She's been sick all week. The doc sent medicine." The deputy nodded slowly, scanning the room. His eyes lingered on the shape under the blankets. "Who's that?" he asked. Clara didn't blink. "A farmhand who helped us through winter. Left this morning. What you see, there's just linens waitin' to be washed." Rains took a step forward. She held her breath. Then Mrs. Mayfield gave another hacking cough, so violent that Rains instinctively turned toward her. "That's enough," he said gruffly. "Let the poor woman rest." He tipped his hat. "If Callahan comes back, Miss Mayfield, you let us know. He's wanted for murder. Ain't no kindness worth hangin' for." She forced a tight smile. "I understand." They left soon after, the sound of hooves fading down the trail. Clara waited until they were gone, then collapsed to her knees, trembling. Luke stirred weakly from the bed. "They gone?" She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes. But they'll be back." He exhaled, pain etched deep into every line of his face. "You should have let me go before sunrise." "And let them hang an innocent man?" she shot back. "No. I won't lose you too." Her words hung heavy between them. The silence after was soft, fragile, like the calm after a lightning strike. Luke reached for her hand, his fingers cold but steady. "Claire, I can't keep running. It'll bring the law down on you, your mama." "Then stop running," she said, her voice breaking. "Stay. We'll face it together." He looked at her for a long moment, eyes searching hers. "You'd risk everything for me?" She nodded. "I already have." That night, as the fire burned low, Luke sat by the window, his shoulder freshly bandaged, his revolver resting on the table. Clara slept near her mother, exhaustion finally claiming her. Outside, the stars stretched endless and cold over the prairie. Luke whispered into the dark, "If they come again, I won't let him touch her." For the first time since he'd fled his past, he wasn't afraid to stand still. He was no longer just a fugitive. He was a man with something, someone, to protect. And come sunrise, Silver Creek would find out what love, once wounded, was capable of. The morning came quiet and gray, the kind of dawn that held its breath. Mist curled low along the valley floor, wrapping the Mayfield cabin in a hush so deep even the birds stayed silent. Inside the fire burned low. Clara sat beside her mother, spooning broth between trembling lips. Luke stood near the door, already dressed, his coat pulled over his still healing shoulder. His hat was low, shadowing eyes that had made their peace with what lay ahead. "You're leavin', aren't you?" Clara's voice cracked as she said it. Luke turned slowly. "I have to. If I stay they'll come back. Next time they won't ask permission to search." Clara shook her head, tears pooling. "You can't even lift your arm proper. You won't make it a mile before they find you." He smiled, faint but sure. "Then I'll make it too." She took a shaky step forward. "Luke, please don't do this. There's gotta be another way." He reached out, brushing his thumb against her cheek. "There is. But not for me." Her lip trembled. "You don't get to decide that alone." "I do," he whispered. "When it's your safety I'm deciding for." Behind them Mrs. Mayfield spoke softly, her voice worn but firm. "If the good Lord means for your paths to meet again, they will. Sometimes love ain't about holding on, it's about letting go before the world tears it apart." Luke bowed his head, the weight of her words sinking deep. "You raised a strong daughter, ma'am." Mrs. Mayfield smiled faintly. "She was strong long before I taught her anything." By midday, Luke was saddling his horse behind the cabin. Clara came out with his bag, patched and mended from his time there. "I packed what you'll need," she said softly. "And food enough for a few days." He looked at her, wanting to say everything and nothing at once. "You've done more for me than any soul ever did." "You don't owe me words," she murmured. "Just come back if the world ever turns kind again." He hesitated, then leaned in, pressing his lips to her forehead, slow, reverent, as if memorizing her. "I'll carry you with me," he said. "Every mile." She blinked hard, holding back a sob. "Then go before I can't let you." Luke rode out into the mist, the world swallowed in white. Each hoofbeat echoed like a heartbeat fading away. Clara stood in the doorway until he disappeared, her shawl fluttering in the wind. Hours passed. The air grew heavy. Then, far down the valley came the sound of distant riders, shouts carried on the cold wind. The law had found him. At the edge of Silver Creek, Luke turned his horse toward the rising sun. 5 riders closed in behind him, rifles drawn. He could hear Rains calling out. "Luke Callahan. You're under arrest for the murder of Sheriff Dalton." Luke reined in, his breath clouding in the cold air. He turned his horse slow and calm, meeting their eyes one by one. "I ain't running," he called back. "Not this time." Rains frowned. "Then drop your weapon." Luke hesitated, then tossed his revolver into the snow. "I didn't kill Dalton out of hate. I did it, 'cause he wouldn't let me walk away. But I'll face what comes, long as that girl and her mama stay out of it." Rains studied him a long moment. There was something in Luke's voice, steady, tired, honest. Finally, the deputy nodded. "Let's get you back to town." Luke's eyes lifted once more toward the mountains, the cabin hidden beyond them, the woman who had seen him as more than a fugitive. Then he straightened his shoulders and rode down the trail without another word. Weeks later, word spread through Silver Creek. Some said Luke Callahan had been tried and cleared, his case tossed out when witnesses proved Dalton had drawn first. Others whispered he'd escaped before the verdict, vanishing into the wilderness. But Clara knew the truth, because one spring evening as she hung laundry by the river, she found his bandana tied to a branch, fluttering in the breeze. Tucked inside was a note, written in a hand she'd know anywhere. "Still ridin'. Still breathin'. Still yours." She pressed the fabric to her chest, her eyes stinging with tears. The setting sun bathed the hills in gold, and the wind carried the faintest sound of hooves, soft, steady, fading toward forever. Epilogue. Years later, travelers passing through Silver Creek would speak of the widow's daughter who once nursed an outlaw back to life. They'd say she kept a lantern burning in her window through every storm, waiting for a cowboy who promised he'd return. And though no one could swear they saw him again, every spring when the snow melted, that same bandana would appear, tied to the same branch by the river. A quiet promise between two souls who had found love where no one expected it. In a blizzard, in a cabin, in the mercy of a woman's hands. And though time would fade their names, the story of the widow's daughter and the wounded cowboy lived on. As a whisper in the wind that swept across Silver Creek.